Here's our hat as economists. What I'm showing in front of you basically is a scatter plot that tells you something pretty obvious, that in better institutionalized countries, that is countries where rule of law rules supreme, courts are working, are effective, the decisions are fair, and the laws are enforced, in these countries actually you have a higher GDP per capita. Okay, so that's fine. That's across continent, that's across the world. Now, if we look at Africa, the relationship across African countries is attenuated, but we still get kind of the same picture. Places like Namibia, like South Africa, that have a better quality of national institutions compared, let's say, to Congo or Cameroon, they seem also to register higher income per capita. Now, of course, economists, particularly the last 20 years, we have tried to move as forcefully as possible for making statements from, something correlates with another thing, so X correlates with Y, to basically trying to say something more meaningful, that actually X causes Y. So, and there is a huge debate about, whether actually truly it is national institution variation across countries that matters for economic development, or there is actually a third factor, perhaps the culture of people, perhaps the geography of the countries, that makes economic development happen, and national institutions is just an afterthought of more prosperous economies. So, and of course, if you look at the African countries, that's the variation basically in institutional quality, roughly around 2000. So you have some, very low quality institutional countries like Congo, DRC, or Somalia. And you have like some pretty good examples like Botswana or Ghana or Namibia, that they score very high on national level institutions. Now, as you look at this map, you immediately start thinking, well, of course, there is no, if you wear your hat as a European or as an American economist, you think of these as monolithic countries, that there is no much diversity, but, that's very far from the truth. Because if you actually take out your glasses and you look at the continent, as a continent of, like Chris Ehret told us in the first week, a very diverse continent, then you're going to find yourself in a very different world. So what I'm showing in front of you right now, this is a map that different polygons portray the historical homelands of groups right around the beginning of the 20th century. So this is kind of our best and at the same time, worst understanding of, where you would find, let's say, the Kikuyu right around the beginning of the 19th century, the Yoruba right around the beginning of the 19th century. So immediately what basically comes to life when you look at this, so this is by Murdock in his book in 1959, Africa and Its People, and it was digitized by Nathan Nunn, while Nathan was a graduate student, and it has become a standard part of viewing Africa and understanding that the mosaic of its languages and groups. Of course, there is lots of noise, and there is actually work trying to rectify, trying to improve upon this map, but let's say that this is a starting point of the ethnic diversity on the ground, roughly around 100 and 150 years ago. Okay, now, as soon as you look at this map, then you realize that actually this example of East and West Germany and North and South Korea, these tragic experiments have been repeated many times in the context of the African continent. Starting from this conference in Berlin and culminating over the next decades, borders will land upon, colonial borders will land upon African territory. And these borders are basically involving protectorates, free trade areas, and spheres of influence, rather than potential states. Nevertheless, upon decolonization, these European borders will become the reality of lots of contemporary African states. So here, basically, what I'm showing you is two maps, like overlaying the underlying diversity of groups and languages as portrayed in the map of Murdock in 1959. And on top of that, we see the red lines are contemporary national boundaries. Now, as you look at this, you immediately realize that there is a lot of groups that had the fate to actually find themselves split, partitioned into different countries. So these are actually, of course, there is measurement error, and people do move around. But this gives us a first good idea of the extent to which different groups found themselves into different level institutions. Okay, so that's the historical natural experiment. Partitioned ethnic homelands in adjacent countries have, we can actually show that they have relatively similar geographic and ecological endowments. And then we can actually, starting from this observation, we can start asking the question, okay, so now let's say you have the Ani or the Ambo, part of this group is found in a country with relatively superior institutional quality in terms of its government. Is this reflected in the economic development in this part of the group? So how many groups we have that actually have been treated, have suffered from partition? We have basically huge photos that give us an idea of how much light comes from a given pixel at any given point in time over the last, starting in 92 up until today. Okay, now how should we interpret light? And places with that are emit more luminosity in the night? You should think of it that is a measure of wealth, a measure of consumption, and measure of production. There is a lot of works that are have been produced showing that places, pixels, locations that are more lit up in the night are actually are much more developed in terms of other measures of income per capita or wealth or education. So we're going to take this as our starting point and use and try to explain and try to see whether actually, in the end of the day, there is more light on the side of the border with the higher level institutions. So here's how the African continent looks like in 2000. There is lots of unlit pixels, but also some very interesting variation on the ground. Okay, so here's basically the example. Here we look at the Ambo group. The Ambo are split between Angola in the north and Namibia in the south. And you can think of it in like that Namibia on average has better quality institutions, national level than Angola. Is it the case that you get to see more luminosity in the part of the group of the Ambo in Namibia, which is the southern part, versus the northern part in Angola? And in this specific case, you would actually find out that this is true. And so on your left side, you will actually find that groups whose partitions are found close on both sides to the capital cities, then indeed, if you are close to the capital of a highly institutionalized country, let's say South Africa, then indeed luminosity will jump compared to the same part of the same group on the other side of the border. And however, if you look far from the capital, that is basically, you look at places at the hinterland where groups on both sides of the border, they're respectively both far from the capital city, then you actually see no difference as you cross the border from one side to another. So, this actually was kind of a wake-up call for us, saying that, look, you should stop thinking of, whatever we call national level institutions in Angola, national level institutions in Namibia, in Ghana and Togo as one thing that rules them all, but there is actually a lot of heterogeneity. They matter a lot, these characteristics, these institutional structures, where they are present, and they are much more likely to be present in parts in kind of the urban centers and the capital cities. This already gives us an idea that there is this like features of institutional structures that they were very salient, at least during the pre-colonial era. And given that during the colonial era and the post-colonial period, these structures were not entirely wiped out, and often, in fact, they may have been used either by the colonizers or by the nascent, governments in Africa. Then it stands. Then Elias and I thought, could it be the case that actually it is this variation in pre-colonial centralization, in pre-colonial extent of state that might explain development across regions within the same country in Africa? So let's actually look at that. Okay, now, but how to get an idea of which groups are centralized, which groups are not centralized? Then we have to fall back again to George Peter Murdock's work, which is the Ethnolinguistic Atlas, where he offers a compendium of characteristics, including basically the one on jurisdictional hierarchy above the local community level. There is a lot of work showing that there is a lot of measurement error in this map, in this classification, but also quite a bit of ground truth. Okay, so what we actually have, so we have a measure of the number of how centralized was the group in the pre-colonial era, starting from stateless societies to large centralized states. So here is basically the map that I was showing you earlier with the underlying groups, but now the groups have different colors. Darker colors depict the places where mini states, states with local administrative machinery in the pre-colonial era was present. Yellow states were more like the acephalous societies, the ones without any central administration. We're in Zambia now. We have two groups that we can look at. The group on the west, that is on the left of your screen, you're looking at the Lamba, a centralized group in Zambia, and right next to it are the Lala on the east, which is an acephalous society. So so we're within the same country, we're comparing neighboring groups. On one side, we have the centralized ones, and the other side, we have the less centralized, the acephalous ones. In the case of this group, of this pair, actually, the centralized group seems to have much more pixels lit in the night than the neighboring Lala. Now, is it the case across Africa? Do you actually get the same pattern? If you look within countries and you compare places, you compare neighboring ethnic groups, one that is centralized in the pre-colonial era to the guys next door that were actually acephalous during the pre-colonial era, what you will see today, that's what you will see. So here the positive numbers reflect the group that has the high quality local pre-colonial institutions, strong institutions. On the left side is basically ethnic groups without such legacies. And so you see clearly that the luminosity jumps as soon as you cross the border on the other side. So now this is within the same country, within Namibia, within Congo, within Zambia, that you get actually this picture. It seems that within Africa, there is a dual institutional framework across many African regions. And what mediates the quality of the relationship between national level actors and local actors is the historical legacy of the groups. So I think that that's kind of what we learned as economists, and we brought back to our economics understanding of local development in Africa. There is lots of exciting work in terms of mechanisms, since we initially documented this positive correlation between development and pre-colonial centralization, but much remains to be uncovered. Heterogeneity, we keep on thinking and we keep on learning actually. So I hope that much more work will come out of it. There is several issues that I'm sure we will get to that when Warren takes the floor. Now, of course, you may be thinking, but why some places got more? Why some places centralized institutions were more common rather than others? That's why we have tomorrow Marcela Alsan and James Fenske to walk us through several of the arguments that have been made. For now, I yield the virtual floor to Warren, and I look forward to it.